All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the fourth installment of Texas Folklife's Folk and Traditional Arts Virtual Roundtable. My name is Charlie Lockwood. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Folklife. I'd like to welcome all of our viewers here to this panel. We are really excited to host a number of great guests that we have this evening on the issue of sustainability in accordion music of Texas. There are all kinds of people we could have asked to be on this panel, and I wanted to make sure we got folks representing different communities and different music forms. And I think we have a great panel assembled for you this evening. Hopefully, this is the first of many panels that we have talking about Texas accordion music. It's obviously a subject that is near and dear to our hearts at Texas Folklife. But we're going to continue along with our roundtable series here. This is, again, an experiment that we're doing right now, Texas Folklife, to continue some of our programming and stay connected during this time. And so I want to welcome all of our panelists, and then we'll get right into the discussion. If you have questions that you want to raise for the panel, please post them here on our Facebook page. We'll try to get to your questions. If we can't get to them this time, we'll try to follow up later and make sure we get those questions answered, because I know many of you might have some. So I'm going to quickly just introduce the panelists, and then we will take it away. So we've got joining us this evening Dr. Dan Margulies from Virginia Wesleyan University, history professor there. Dan, hello, welcome. We have Lola Love, the Zydeco lady as well, president of Zydeco Events and host of several Zydeco radio shows and efforts. So I'll introduce her in full as we get to her presentation. Lola, thank you for joining us. We have Santiago Castillo, an accordionist, touring musician, and educator, joining us as well. We have Francis Barton, also an accordionist and author. And we have Sarah Rucker, who is the Big Squeeze program director for Texas Folklife and founder of Full Gallop. So we have a wide variety of panelists here to talk about this subject. And I'm going to give each of them about 8 minutes to kind of frame their presentation and talk about whatever's on their mind, and then we'll bring it back for discussion at the end. So we're going to start things off with Dan Margulies, who's going to be talking about issues in music and sustainability. I've known Dan for several years. He, again, is a professor of history at Virginia Wesleyan University. He's also chair of the history department there and chair of American Studies. But in addition to his wide publications on history, he also has been a scholar of Texas Tejano conjunto music and other forms of vernacular American music. And we've worked together on several projects. He was the founding director of the Festival of Texas Fiddling, which we've been partnering on for 5 years now, and is a scholar and performer of conjunto music and many other forms of vernacular American music. So I don't want to spend too long on the bios of all these people, because we could spend a long time talking about their accolades and all their great experience. So I will end my introduction there and turn things over to Dan Margulies. Dan, welcome. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Charlie. It's good to be here with everybody and be involved in this. I always like talking about sustainability in music. I'm interested in traditional musics of all kinds, and then I was really interested in conjunto music. And then when I came across this idea of sustainable culture, cultural sustainability in ethnomusicological and folklore academic worlds, I thought, oh wow, this is pretty much exactly what's going on in conjunto. Only nobody, outside of that world, which is vibrant in Texas, South Texas, the rest of the world kind of ignores it, even though it's really a model of cultural sustainability and of the way American traditional vernacular music can survive in a globalized era and in a highly commercialized era. I mean, I think I'm interested in what everyone else has said, particularly, zydeco is a very living and popular and widespread national tradition. And so what's interesting with conjunto is it hasn't really, except for some little pockets in other places in California and Southwest, it really is remained very strong in its homeland. But unlike other musics in Texas, traditional music, it's also hasn't disappeared or just become sort of folklorically presented by arts organizations or stylized reenactments like Western swing has become more or less. So I'm interested in all of these different kind of musics, but particularly this as a model. So Charlie asked me to talk about, and I am a professor, but I don't want to lecture. So I have the advantage of going first, so I'm going to be real quick. But to kind of explain what cultural sustainability is, because it kind of sounds like it is what it sounds like, which is basically importing these notions of ecological sustainability into a cultural realm. And the ethnomusicologist who started to do that was this guy named Jeff Todd Titan, who mostly has worked on southeastern, fiddle and banjo music and religious music. And what he was doing was responding to this movement around the world of sort of classifying intangible cultural heritage in various places as a category of cultural treasure, kind of the way that you would say the a historical site or a cultural site, the tangible, you hallmark them, you make them into UNESCO World Heritage sites. Well, they started to do that with culture. And if you've ever visited a UNESCO World Heritage site in the physical world, they are filled with buses and crowds, and they're kind of a nightmare, even though they're these very significant places. And so a similar thing was happening to cultures, which get kind of, in some ways, in the preservation of them, they get destroyed or they get transformed. They get put under glass in ways that robs them of their vitality and of their singularity. So, so the ideas, excuse me, the ideas from ecology, like diversity, sustainability, connectedness to other events, stewardship of them, and a kind of natural growth or a limit to the growth. And so those are the four basic categories that we would think of in sustainability. And I'll just say generally why I think conjunto is so successful at it, and I'll give some examples and then I'll stop talking. But so I think that success for conjunto comes because it's a really syncretic tradition. So it's a deep tradition, but it's always been open to other sounds. And in fact, of course, it comes out of a synthesis of Mexican music with Polish and German and Czech music. So it comes in this very unique fusion of cultures, and perfected by Tejano people. And then there's been this continual sort of openness to progressiveness. And one of the hallmarks maybe of, that kind of freezes traditional music sometimes is this desire to define it and then limit its development. So you see this, and I also play Appalachian music, and that's a very conservative tradition in the sense that it either is or it isn't, and it's not, and if it's not really open to too many transformations after a certain point in the 1920s, let's say, it's at the last point. But conjuntos continued to grow, and so what we, and I'm sure that Santiago will talk about this more, but nowadays, old school conjunto and the stuff that's popular now, it's totally related, it's a continuum, but it also is very different. And I think that even the most progressive players now are very open to and attuned to and respectful of the old traditions. On the same time, they have an ear for the new stuff, and that's really what. There's no fear of it sort of disappearing because it's developed this very ecologically, in an ecological way, so very rich sort of ecosystem. So you make a very rich soil and things grow there rather than just the monocrop that is, And so let's see, I don't know how many, I said there were these four parts of it, and I kind of broke this into 4 or 5 parts, but these are the things that the kind of apparatus in the state that I think are such a model, why it's successful. And one of them that I'm really interested in is the festival, in the sense that these are put on by organizations or sometimes by individuals or sometimes by towns, but these are showcasing, a specific kind of variant of the music. And the festivals have another function of not only bringing people together, but also kind of modeling what can happen. And so the one that I've studied the most is in San Antonio, the Tejano Conjunto Festival. And Charlie might be thinking, well, you don't start with the festivals, you start with the organizations. But my feeling is the festivals are kind of bigger than and become more significant than the organizations themselves. There's a bunch of other ones, the Narciso Festival in San Benito, the Rancho Alegre Festival in Austin, There's even a Sacramento conjunto festival. And so, there's the idea that you present the music and that people come also participate at these, particularly by dancing. And so conjunto music is a music not just of performance and not just of listening, but of involvement and dancing. And then, so the second kind of factor, I think, are these organizations, which are both statewide and mostly are local. And the most interesting thing about them is they pretty much all were created by people, interested in fostering these cultures that they want to pursue. So, of course, obviously, Texas Folklife as a statewide organization, but founded originally by folklorists. The Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center in San Antonio, the Narciso Martinez Cultural Arts Center in San Benito, and then other associations like South Texas Conjunto Association, these kind of associations. And, America used to be, de Tocqueville talked about it a long time ago, it used to be the nation of organizations, of associations, people who wanted to preserve whatever it was, their cultural form, dancing, religion, shooting clubs, whatever. They formed these associations. And Texas is one of the places that's the great kind of, it's still really happening there, and particularly, I think, among conjunto groups. So you meet a lot of people and they end up starting an organization to preserve it, to preserve the music. And that's not found everywhere and in all kind of musics, but it is in successful music. Cajun music would be one example where that happened. Appalachian old time music is another. But musics where that doesn't happen, these things tend to fade away. Another part is what I would call the commercial apparatus, of which there's I was just talking to actually a friend of mine in San Antonio, just, talking about this, the quarantine, and he's, thinking, well, all those thousands of businesses on the west side, what's going to San Antonio, what's going to happen to them? All these little, just a proliferation of everything. And so that, one of the things that helps a culture be sustained are these existence of these kind of commercial clubs, VFWs, variety of these different dance halls, really small record labels, the radio station CADA in San Antonio, which is, this kind of something of a tradition-bearing organization. It also puts on its own festival. I should have mentioned a big free festival that's up there. It's one of the big ones in the year. Another aspect of it are these teaching programs, which develop, sometimes started by organizations. Texas Folklife has an apprenticeship program, and maybe Charlie won't want to hear it, but I think more significant than those are the real small ones, which tended to be a passionate player, like, let's say, Rudy Lopez and Lorenzo Martinez in San Antonio, and they'd sort of realize, well, this is going to die out if only old timers are playing it. We should teach kids. And they did this on their own. They didn't do it because the NEA told them to do it. They didn't do it even because Texas Folklife told them to do it. They just thought to themselves that they loved this tradition, and for reasons really important to the culture, they decided to pass it on. Another example is Juan Longoria down in Brownsville, who was actually a great accordion player, and he won the Big Squeeze contest, and he, has a group, and he comes from a family that plays. His father's an excellent musician, his brother's an ex-musician, but he had this idea, well, I want to teach this to kids, so it goes on. So he on his own started a group at the local high school teaching the kids how to play, and of course those kids have all come up through the other more statewide programs that Texas Folklife puts on. And so that's just came out of himself, and really, I would argue, it came out of the conjunto culture, which I think really fosters that. And then the very last thing, I have sensed Charlie telling me to be quiet, which I think is really interesting and overlooked, is the sort of DIY part of the sustainable system, and like a do-it-yourself thing, which is kind of what these teachers are doing, kind of what the organizations are doing, kind of what the festivals are doing. But there's also this other drive to people to really take advantage of, particularly of new technology and social media, to sort of archive what's going on. So you have people who just go to capture everything that's happening and then put it out there for free, and in a way that helps to really create a culture that is accessible to everybody. And so an example would be Lupe Acuna in San Antonio, put up hundreds of videos of all of the best players and took photographs of them and sort of made this visual and film archive that is up on YouTube and has an enormous following. There's a guy, Robert Tremino, out of Houston, who has a landscaping business and has his whole life, but he also puts together all these videos, which he then edits and puts on. He kind of maintains this kind of channel. So I see these people as these kind of archivists of, keeping the music alive, and in some ways related to like people like Chris Strakowicz, who did that with Arhuli back when, but of course became a commercial record label. And this is all happening at the very grassroots kind of level. Rancho Alegre is another group in Austin. They were doing interviews of old players. They put on a festival, but they have a radio show. There's kind of a full spectrum of all those. And then other people, one other group that really interests me is people who make bajo sexto strings. So like you can buy them commercially, but conjunto is such a handmade culture that people, like in everything, I want to make, they decide that guitar makers, they decide they're going to make bajos, or people, they want to do it, but they also go the whole next step, complicated step, which is make the strings by hand, which is the traditional way to do it. But there's almost no other tradition where people use handmade string. And even in really traditional cultures like other places in the Southeast, everyone buys the same strings. But the fact that the young guys who decide they're going to be luthiers build bajos, who then decide they're also going to build strings, to me, that's just sort of a metaphor for that whole handcrafted sort of approach to the culture. So I will pause there, Charlie.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts there. A lot to come back to in the discussion. Thank you. We're gonna move on now to Lola Love, the Zydeco lady. So Lola is president of zydecoevents.com. She's also the co-chair of the Zydeco Historical and Preservation Society. And she has over 20 years in event planning and promotion, artist management, marketing, sales, and facilities management. She is a seasoned veteran producing stellar programs and events for a wide range of clients and various industries. In addition to her event planning and management, she has over 10 years experience in the radio broadcasting world. She was instrumental in developing the Zydeco Workout, featuring Lola Love, the world's first online webcast dedicated to Zydeco and Southern soul music. She's currently an on-air personality and producer of the Zydeco Workout, featuring Lola Love live on 90.1 FM, KZSU Stanford in Palo Alto, California, and KPCP 88.3 FM in New Roads, Louisiana. So I want to welcome Lola Love and have her take it away.
Thank you so much. First of all, again, thank you so much for having me part of this discussion. Zydeco music is it's a very interesting type of music. It is definitely goes hand in hand with conjunto music because it is an accordion-based music. It's also part of regional roots. And so that's really important to us. I'm part of the Zydeco Historical and Preservation Society. So what we do is we help preserve the music and culture of Southwest Louisiana and Texas. And one of those ways that we do that is by archiving a lot of the musicians' history, their stories. And so I do go to Louisiana, Texas, and in parts of California as well, I interview the artist directly and get their history, their explanation, their background of how they started playing Zydeco music or blues as well. And we just archive that. We have that in video form, and we also play it in our radio broadcast, the Zydeco Workout at Stanford University. And that's our way of just kind of helping preserve the music and culture again. And we're also included, and we're part of the Regional Roots aspect in the Recording Academy. So we help with the musicians. We want to make sure that they are involved. Zydeco music is definitely involved and kept involved at the Recording Academy level. So we We reach out to those musicians when it's time to submit their projects for Grammy consideration, and we keep in touch with them. We build those relationships with the musicians. We want to make sure that they're again involved, and sometimes they have questions as far as their music. What are the specific characteristics of a project? What do they need to do to involve different pieces of the project for Grammy consideration? So we get involved in that level. But again, we build strong relationships so musicians can feel they can contact me or my partner at any time. My partner is Rod Sias. He was born in Opelousas, Louisiana, zydeco capital of the world. And the reason for him forming the Zydeco Historical and Preservation Society is because in the early 80s, zydeco music was dying out. So, his parents were actually involved in the development of the very first zydeco festival ever in Plaisance, Louisiana. And they were called the Treasurers of Opelousas, which again, a small group of citizens there trying to make sure that the music is kept, going and it's out there. So they helped develop this festival. And from that, other festivals, took it, around the world. Also, I wanted to tell you about the Zydeco, the Zydeco workout at Stanford University. It's been going on live for about a little bit over, I want to say over 16 years now. This was something that, again, we started early on. We just wanted to make sure that the music was heard here in California as well, because a lot of our musicians have traveled to California as well, playing live music, so they do have a following. And so we wanted to make sure that, again, the music is played throughout the year. And so that became my project. That became the host of it, playing the music. And while we, after the show would be finished, that we'd upload it to our websites, Zydeco Online, Zydeco Events, and ZydecoWorkout.com. ZydecoEvents.com, we purchased that a couple of years ago from Joe Norman. Joe Norman was, looking to start a new era in his career, and so he offered that to us so that we can continue to help preserve the music again. So we took that on, and again, another project for us. So by helping events as far as live Zydecos, trail rides, festivals, there continues to be that website where they can find all this information about these events that are taking place, and at a minimal cost. Again, Zydeco Events is a little bit more of a fundraiser for the Zydeco Historical and Preservation Society. These flyers or events that are posted there, most of them are done for free, and and some of them are for a very small amount or small proceed for the Zydeco Historical. So it becomes this tax deduction for folks that purchase it. What else? I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, we have we are involved in so many aspects of the culture that it's me, my partner Rod Sias, Maripa Karamoko, who does relations. What else? There's 2 other members as well. There's Robert Ricks, who does our technology design, and Cedric Johnson, who does our research and educational programming. We also have Alaric Robinson, who does our development as well. But again, we're a small group, but we are involved in so many aspects of Zydeco music and Creole culture. And I think that's all I can say at this moment until we have a little discussion as far as if you have any questions for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lola. Appreciate it. Sounds like you have a lot of good work going on there. I'm going to turn now to Santiago Castillo, who's our next presenter. Santiago is an accordionist, touring musician, and educator, and he grew up in a musical family and has incorporated music into all areas of his life. He graduated from UT Brownsville, and he formerly directed the Canales Elementary Conjunto program in Brownsville, and now he directs the Los Fresnos Elementary Conjunto program. As a multi-instrumentalist, he has taught hundreds of young people the instruments of conjunto music for over a decade and has performed with numerous bands, most recently Grupo Azido. So, Santiago, thank you so much for joining us.
Question? What was that, sir? Can you repeat that?
I was just turning it over to you. The floor is yours, and I think we have a little bit of video delay, but go ahead.
Yeah, it kind of stalls. I'm sorry. Yeah, my name's Santiago Castillo, for those of you that don't know me. Thank you for having me on your show. And I just wanted to share my experience as far as like teaching conjunto and growing up with conjunto music. Being in band, the school band, and going to college and being in the jazz band and stuff, there was never, I grew up around conjunto music from my family, and I couldn't really relate to the school band or the in college jazz band. There was no accordion or anything like that. So when I graduated and wanted to teach music, I said, you know what, it lent itself to teach conjunto music. And I think it begins there. It begins with the youth. Okay, if we're gonna keep this tradition going, just like the Texas Folklife has, you guys have your events for the youth and the big squeeze. I think those events are awesome, and it just keeps the music going. I did take my conjunto one year, I'd say about 3 years ago, to TMEA in San Antonio, and they performed there at that convention, and that really opened the doors to the other kids that were around there. Being that the event was more for choirs and ORF related groups, and then having kids with sombreros and accordions with something different, and that I think stuff like that really it helps the music stay driven and keep going. So I would say I just want to say that it all starts off with the youth and these events that like I think Dan was mentioning, having all these events, quinceañeras and weddings, because the culture stuff is what really keeps this music alive. And now having these programs, at the high school level and now at the elementary level, I think that even is going to keep our tradition going, keep the accordion going. And what else? Any other questions? I'm sorry. Any questions that you would like to ask me?
Yeah, we can get to some bigger discussion things later. I guess a question for you is kind of tell me about your current teaching role and involvement in Los Fresnos, and who are the kids you work with, and how that started.
Okay, yes. This year I moved to Los Fresnos elementary school, and I started a new conjunto there. And having a lot of support from parents, we got some instruments and put a group together. And just started from there. We've still been practicing over online. I've been sending them lessons through videos, and then we kind of puzzle the songs together on an app called Acapella. So that's the way we've been doing it as far as like practicing, and just keep practicing with the group. We have thought about doing a summer program. It's something in the that we've been talking about, so we can continue this with the little ones. Being that we have at the high school we have a program for conjunto, with what Juan Longoria. This is really something that the kids look up to and just, you know, look forward to continuing. As opposed to the other district where I was at, it would just die off at that, you know, after the elementary level. So that's something that's a plus. So yes.
How many students do you currently have?
Right now I have about 14 students, and I just tried. I did tryouts, and some of the students that tried out, I had them at the end of the day. I had all of them that tried out be part of the conjunto, so I just doubled all the instruments and had them shadowing each other. And when they perform, you know, they take turns, stuff like that. So the more the merrier. And I think just keeping, now that we have a group there in the elementary level, it blew up so much this year that other elementaries want to start. I know I had a call from a teacher over in Roma that wants to start an elementary group as well, and was asking me for some pointers, how I started and stuff like that. So that's awesome that they're starting them at a younger age, so that this keeps going and our culture and our music doesn't die off.
And are you finding that the kids that are joining your program, how are they exposed to the music? Is it through their families? Are they coming to you enthusiastic? I want to learn this. How does that work?
Some of them are used to listening to the music. I mean, it's part of our culture here in Brownsville. Quinceañeras and weddings is a normal thing here, so they've come across it during, you know, a party or something. So they are accustomed to the music, but they never saw themselves playing it. So being that it's offered now, and they can really relate to it, and it really I'm gonna say it drives them to learn it, because they have it, they hear it at home. There are some students that have not listened to the music because they're from it's a different culture to them, but they are very, very excited to learn about it, especially because they live down here. So it's a little bit of all different types of worlds. So that really kind of drives me to teach them, especially the ones that have never heard it before. I like to share my experiences and talk about the history of conjunto music.
That's great. I guess one more question that's coming to mind is what can organizations like Texas Folklife do to help educators like you? What are your goals, and how can we work together on helping you to accomplish those?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems, especially for a program that I've started, it's been voluntary. So I've been doing it at my own time after school. I don't have a set conjunto practice during the day. I'm a music teacher during the day for all levels. So I do this after school. So one thing that would help would be the instruments. I know that we're very, very short on instruments, and being that I'm a musician, I carry a few accordions and bajos, my instruments to start the program. So that's really always one thing that that we lack as far as starting a conjunto program.
Okay, and anything else you want to say before we move on?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I was really surprised. I was listening to Dan, and I was like, "What? I can't speak like that." But yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm glad that I got a chance to kind of talk about what I'm doing and show you guys. And I hope if you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. You can look me up on Facebook, Santiago Castillo, or you can look for me on at my email, sancastillo12956 at lfcisd.net.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to hear from you.
Thank you for having me.
And I guarantee you, Dan can't play or teach music like you, so you guys are even. Even though Dan is a great musician himself. Okay, thank you, Santiago. Let's move ahead here to Francis Barton, who is an author and also an accordionist. And I'm going to read a quick little sentence or two about the work Francis is doing. Francis and her co-author, John Novak, have been working for several years on an annotated songbook they call Czech Songs in Texas. The book is scheduled to be published in 2021 by the University of Oklahoma Press. Francis and John are both accordionists. John is a professor of music at Northern Illinois University, where he teaches music theory, and Francis's training is in journalism and music. She plays in several ensembles, including the Czech Melody Masters, a Texas Czech polka band that has members from Taylor and in Austin. So, Francis, I'll turn it over to you to talk about Texas polka and the things you're doing.
Well, thanks, Charlie. I'm going to talk about the songbook that I'm working on, and then about one of the songs that we have in the book. Czech Songs in Texas is an annotated collection of 60 songs with Czech lyrics, mostly polkas and waltzes. The songs are representative of the many Czech songs that can be heard in the state, usually played by polka bands that include accordions. They are considered our music by descendants of the mid-19th century immigrants who came here from the historic Czech lands, which were then very unhappily part of the Habsburg Empire. The immigrants began to settle in Central Texas starting in the early 1850s. They came to Texas for land, and most became small cotton farmers. I'm going to put up a map. It's a homemade map. This is a map of the independent Czech Republic today. It has two main regions, Bohemia and Moravia. The capital of the country is Prague, which is located in Bohemia. Brno, down there by Austria, is the largest city in Moravia. Both cities have major universities. There are also 4 towns that are identified on the map. These towns are located in rural areas that produce most of the Czechs who settled in Texas. The first group started out in 1851 from Chełmno in northeast Bohemia. It's up there by Poland. About 10% of the immigrants came from this area, including the family of John, my co-worker, my co-author. But most of the Texas Czechs, over 80% of them, came from an area around 3 towns in eastern Moravia, near the border with Slovakia. It's a region of beautiful hills and mountains, but poor soil. The most northern of the 3 towns is Fränstadt, up there on the top. Settin in the middle is where my family's from. Zadvršice, below Settin, is right there. Czech immigration to Texas followed a specific pattern that's called district chain immigration, in which many people from a particular district immigrate to the same new location. For example, the little town of Trojanovice, located 3 miles from Fränstadt, sent over 500 of its inhabitants to Texas between 1856 and 1895. Many of the people from Trojanovice settled in Fayette County in 3 towns that are close to each other. One of the towns is Fayetteville, another is Dubina, which means oak grove in Czech, and the third is Hostin, which was named for Hostin Mountain, a pilgrimage site in Moravia. The immigrants came in groups composed of family members and neighbors and settled close together when they arrived. Then they sent for other family members and neighbors. Part of the longevity of the Texas Czech ethnic community goes back to this immigration pattern. And here's a map. This is a 1904 map of Texas Czech communities. Settlements began in Austin and Fayette counties, which is right in the 2 counties right in the center of the map, between the Brazos and Colorado rivers, and moved outward. It is now 100 years since the 19th century wave of European immigration came to an abrupt halt in the 1920s when the United States closed its borders. Most of the descendants of the Czechs who did settle here no longer speak Czech, but they still sing in Czech. The dancers and listeners often sing along, but most of them don't understand what the words mean. At the same time, most of the older musicians who learn Czech as their first language are retiring or have passed away. The loss of an ethnic group's distinctive language is a crucial moment, and often the time when song collections such as ours appear. Our book is an attempt to preserve the songs of Texas that have been sung in the Czech language for so many years, and to fill in some of the forgotten history that surrounds this music. Almost all the songs originated in the Old Country, though most went through various changes in the new American environment. We start the book with 2 introductory chapters. John's is a survey of folk and popular music in what is now the Czech Republic. Mine is a history of the Texas Czech ethnic community and the important role that music has played in its development. We include the songs with music notation, Czech lyrics with side-by-side English translations, and an accompanying essay that discusses the history and meaning of each song. That's a brief discussion of our songbook project. Now let's move on to a song called Svatební píseň, which means wedding song. The words and music that made its way to Texas were notated by a Moravian folklorist in 1899. They were taught to him by a 59-year-old singer from Vidce, a village halfway between Frenstadt and Settin. This wonderful drawing is of the wedding procession of Josef and Františka Laštovica that took place in Hosteen, Texas in 1861. It can be seen at the Fayetteville Area Heritage Museum, just a few miles from Hosteen. The drawing depicts a crowd of revelers riding horses alongside a large hill. There are wonderful details in this early image of Czech Texas. The wedding party is headed for a small frame Catholic chapel that sits on top of the hill. You can see it in the top left corner of the drawing. The women wear elaborate headdresses, and some of the men wear a type of hat typical of those worn by Moravian men at that time. The bottles 2 men are waving over their heads likely contain a homemade plum brandy called Slivovice. It's very popular with Moravians and often homemade. One man on horseback fires a pistol up into the air. Several children watch the procession go by, and a boy and a small dog walk beside it. True to the portrayal of the drawing, Czech weddings can be legendary affairs, and some of the traditions associated with early ones persist to this day. One of these traditions is čepení, which means capping ceremony. It's a widespread, traditional Slavic wedding ritual. Late at night during a wedding celebration, the women of the village sing a song while removing the bride's veil and replacing it with an embroidered cap. This headdress symbolizes her new status as a married woman. This photograph is from a late 1970s wedding dance near Shiner, Texas. The capping ceremony was once widespread in Texas and can still be found here. In Texas, a cloth field bonnet, the kind farm women used to wear, substitutes for the more dainty Moravian cap. The bride or both the bride and groom sit in the middle of the dance hall where the festivities are usually held. Women replace the bride's veil with a bonnet while singing Svatební píseň. Or the polka band hired for the dance plays and sings the song. The ceremony is exaggerated and played for laughs. The bonnet might be old and ratty or made of black fabric, or a rather nice one as the one shown in this photo. The groom is often given a straw hat or a cowboy hat. Sometimes a beer is thrust into his hand while the bride gets a baby doll or even a live baby to hold. There are many versions of the lyrics for Svatemny Pisen in Texas, but most include these 3 verses that refer to the capping ceremony. As you can see, as the song progresses, the words become more and more lighthearted, which corresponds to the atmosphere typically found at a big Texas Czech wedding. I will sing the first verse so that you can hear the melody. Teraz byla maminčina, teraz byla maminčina, a dneška už si svoje pana. A dneška už si svoje pana. Well, that's all I have. Back to you.
All right. Hey, thank you, Francis. Thank you for singing for us there. That was great. Thank you for sharing some of your research. We're going to move to our last presenter now. So I'm going to introduce Sarah Rucker. She is the program director for Texas Folklife's Big Squeeze program, which is a statewide youth accordion contest. That's a long-running program that the organization has undertaken. She's also the founder of Full Gallop, and she has over 15 years experience in the arts, doing research, programming, and presenting. She is the founder of Full Gallop, which offers event production, community outreach, and engagement services. And through her projects, she strives to bridge cultures and connect communities through creative collaborations and programs. She has helped to produce events and lead programming from 2006 to 2014 for Texas Folklife, and she rejoined the team recently to direct the Big Squeeze and the Accordion Kings and Queens event in 2019. So, Sarah, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I appreciate you inviting me today, and I have been honored over the years to work with everyone on this panel in some way, and to collaborate and try to work on this goal of sustaining certain cultures and music. So I'm going to do a quick slideshow, and some of the early slides are just kind of general stuff about the different projects I've worked on and my point of view about music sustainability. So let me do this. So before, as Charlie said, I joined the staff of Texas Folklife in 2006. And before that, I was working for Clifford Antone here in Austin, who was the founder of Antone's Nightclub and Antone's Record Shop and record label. So before I started becoming known for accordion music programming, I was helping research and help preserve the history of blues music in America. And then I left the staff in 2014 to work in some other areas of the arts industry and to start my own endeavors as a freelance arts programmer. And as Charlie said, I came back on the team last year as the director of the Big Squeeze. So this is kind of a couple key things that I bring into every project I do. With the Big Squeeze, we constantly talk about our goals and how we can perfect the program every year. And it really is centered around building relationships and engaging with communities throughout the state. And for me, I always want to start out a project or a program with defining what that community is. And for me personally, I use the word lots of different ways. I've worked a lot in the music business, so I can bring that aspect into my work, and worked with nonprofits, obviously. So this relates to the Big Squeeze as well, because the constant check-ins that Charlie and I have about the program and how to grow it and perfect it every year kind of always come back to these elements of presenting the music in an entertaining way to engage with audiences, and then engagement on a deeper level to make sure that we're supporting the genres of music and helping to preserve the cultures. And so different types of events, and these are all used with the Big Squeeze and with the programming that I help Texas Folklife with. So community-based event is often free and open to the public, and elements of accessibility are thought of at all levels. And that is, with a lot of the Big Squeeze events are considered community events. We do our best to make them all free of charge, open to the public, and accessible venues. Then there's private events, like your fundraisers, and we have done fundraisers with the Big Squeeze to help fund the program, and some kind of behind the scenes looks at the program that fans and audience members have been interested in, like the Backyard Bash is something we started a few years ago, and people can buy a ticket and come over and see the kids, the contestants meeting each other and playing with each other and jamming. Promotional events, we've done some of these with the Big Squeeze, such as kind of in stores and record stores, in-store concerts. And those are usually to showcase not only the program, but our partnership with sponsors, or showcase a certain artist that's up and coming. And then what I call presentations are more of a one-off event, like our work, the Texas Folklife's work at the Kennedy Center with Los Tex Maniacs and many other groups. And then program is a term that involves all of these formats, and that's what we call the Big Squeeze, because it's not just a concert, it's much more. So here we are with the 2020 Big Squeeze Accordion Contest. It's in its 14th year now. I wanted to give credit to our graphic designer, Joseph Salazar. We are always looking for the next generation of Texas accordion players. So I'm sure I missed some people in this list, but this is what makes up the Big Squeeze community to us, and what keeps the program going. We need all of these people, and like I said, everybody on this panel is part of this list. So of course we have the contestants, the young players themselves, learning the accordion and participating in the contest. This is not necessarily in order, but the teachers are extremely important, because though a child can learn accordion from YouTube, that they really need the support of a program within the school, and the whole school district and administration supporting the program, like Santiago mentioned. The people like Santiago and Juan Longoria Jr. had to go and do a lot of work to vouch for this in the schools, and when they do gain support from the administration, it's really important, and it's really helped the Big Squeeze grown as well to collaborate with these programs. And then of course, very, very important are the families and support groups of these young people. They make up the audience for the Big Squeeze. They help get the young people to try out. And they're just really important to this whole ecosystem. The audience, of course, we need people to come out and show us that they support our programming and all of the music that we work with. Of course, the staff and volunteers that run the Big Squeeze, the artists, the performing artists. So with all of the Big Squeeze events, we try to have a concert element, and that kind of goes back to that entertainment part of the Venn diagram. If we can get funding and we have the structure and time, we like to present professional musicians for the young people and for the audience to enjoy after the auditions. And of course, promoters and media, people like Lola that have constantly helped get the word out for us and are just promoting the music 24/7 and making sure that it stays alive on radio stations. That's been an issue with conjunto music, I know, finding media outlets that will keep presenting the music in that way. And then organizations like Dan mentioned, with not only the school programs, but people like Conjunto Heritage Taller that he mentioned in San Antonio. There's another program that's privately run in Houston with teacher Rodrigo Gonzalez that we've worked with this year and the past couple of years. It's very important that other organizations and other collaboratives pop up to support the music. In the Big Squeeze, the judges are a big part of it, of course, and our sponsors and funders and patrons, and then research and academia to make sure that the work that Francis and Dan are doing gets out to the public in that realm. And so our outreach efforts through this program have been, we try to span the state of Texas as much as we can. Charlie and I and the rest of the Big Squeeze team have traveled to nearly every corner of the state. And you'll see the pockets of the different genres of music that we work with on this map. I haven't updated it with the 2020 numbers yet, but the Rio Grande Valley has the history of conjunto music, and up to San Antonio. Houston has a great scene now. And then the Central Texas has the polka music, and East Texas around Houston has zydeco and some Cajun music. So these are those genres that we've worked with in the Big Squeeze. The Big Squeeze is open to any traditional accordion-based music. These are the main genres that were either born in Texas or nearby. Zydeco, some parts of the history of zydeco are traced to the Port Arthur border side of Texas. And then there are some other European traditions that kind of don't fit into polka, but we present as much as we can, and we always welcome young people playing traditional music. Oh, by the way, this is the 2019 winners. So we have the conjunto on the left, our zydeco winner, our polka winner, and then our conjunto 17 and under. And all of those for young people will be part of our event this Friday that I'll tell you about in a sec. So within the Big Squeeze program, these are some of the elements that we have seen proof of sustainability. And it goes back to a little bit of what Dan touched on. One thing that that we have worked on is helping, a lot of times collaborating with the school programs, but to make sure that the young people understand the business, or the music business itself, if possible, not only by giving them performance opportunities in front of new or bigger audiences, but really doing our best to support that they understand the life of a professional musician, if that's what they're interested in pursuing. So pairing them, giving them workshops with professional musicians, learning techniques that they didn't know before, or learning about other genres of accordion music. These are all things in addition to just purely putting on a contest and trying to find the best of the best that we talk about constantly with this program. And definitely we do our best on a year-round basis to keep in touch with the teachers such as Santiago and Juan Longoria Jr., who was mentioned, in all of the Valley based or all of the state teachers that we know of. Not all of those are within school districts, but we, Texas Folklife advocates for more school based programs, because we've seen the success in the Valley with that. And then, like I said, introducing the young people to the other genres. So maybe it's a predominantly conjunto based group of young people, but we have a zydeco musician give them a workshop, and they learn new things, and they learn about other cultures. And then collaborations with public-private, meaning collaborations with record stores and other kind of for-profit music business efforts. Honer Accordions is one of our sponsors, and they've been great throughout the years to support us as a for-profit corporation that's supporting this nonprofit endeavor. And then how we kind of look back while I'm producing the Big Squeeze, but definitely recapping after every year. One that's kind of obvious is that if we get increased participation in the program, we've been averaging 40 to 50 contestants every year statewide. But we know of hundreds of young people playing accordion, as Santiago mentioned. One story of, since Juan Longoria Jr. was mentioned, he was the first winner of the Big Squeeze, and he started the program at Los Fresnos High School, and hopefully this doesn't embarrass him, but he called me like the first day that he started his program, and he had like 2 students, and he was kind of freaking out. And I think within a month he had a waiting list and now has hundreds of students. And it just goes to show how many people are interested in participating in this at an educational level. One thing I've kept track of is the diversity, especially with gender. The history of most of accordion music in Texas is to be more male dominant. And this year, for instance, with the Big Squeeze, I saw 33% of the contestants were female. So there's a couple things that could point towards, but I just think it's a really great sign of the music continuing, and that young girls are picking up the accordion and knowing that they can be supported as well. New bands forming. So one really exciting thing for me is to see some of these young people become professionals, like I said, if that's what they're interested in. So one great example that was not Texas Folklife taking credit, but a group that was a winner of the Big Squeeze is Los Morales Boys. They're a family band from Dallas, and Nachito Morales is the accordionist who won the Big Squeeze, and they went on to, they've performed at all the state festivals and have won awards, and there's many more bands that the Big Squeeze winners that have been popular in Texas. And then just new partnerships, like I said, school board interest, definitely funding is always an important thing. If we, you know, Charlie and his team and I can continue to find sources for funding for the Big Squeeze program, then that is a good sign. If people are willing to pay cover charge when they go to events, and you know, there's some really great free festivals in the folk circuit in this country, but you know, on a club level, venue level, as Dan mentioned, it's very important that cover charge is paid, and hopefully when we get back to live events, that's something that people are more than willing to pay so that they can get the experience of live music again. And then media attention, like I mentioned before. So that is what I had to contribute. We do have our first, let me stop this, online Big Squeeze finals this Friday. So I'm gonna shamelessly plug that. It's back here on Facebook Live of Texas Folklife Facebook Live, and it will include performances by the 2019 winners and the announcement of the 2020 winners. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you all for your presentations here. You've given me a lot of great questions to ask, which I can get to. But first, we actually had a question come in on Facebook from Shirley Johnson, who is a accordionist here in the Austin area. And this question is for Santiago. So I'll let him address it first. So Shirley is asking, how do you get the school district to agree to include accordion-based music curriculum, especially when the schools are so worried about state testing and some of those demands? And then her follow-up question is, do you think we can get polka or a mix of different genres and traditions in the Austin school district? So how did you do it, and what are your tips?
Well, of course, I try to do this in an after-school thing, so that it doesn't interfere with the instructional day. And the districts that I've worked with, they've been very supportive as far as starting programs for the students, that engages them and motivates them to strive for better academics. So I haven't had any problems with the school district as far as giving me permission. It's the other way around. They actually like that and they enjoy that, especially because it's music from our culture. So the other question was including other styles of music.
How, I think she's asking, how can she get something like that started in the Austin school district? It sounds like the after school program is maybe a good first way to do that, because then they're not constrained by the testing issues.
Yes, that would be the best bet, to do it after school. And I would recommend maybe starting off with a small group, starting off small instead of with a lot of students, so you can adjust to the time frame that you have, and you have, so you don't interfere with other programs, and then build it up from there, not just have everything at once, because the district might, say, hey, they need to focus on this first. So once they see that it's something that helps the students, then I think they should be totally supportive of it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that at the high school level, and maybe now even at the middle school level, you can take conjunto as an official ensemble, part of like the performing arts curriculum. So you get class credit to do it. I know in Los Fresnos, I think it works that way. Our partners in Roma as well. So I think that you can get to a point where you can build that into the curriculum.
Exactly.
And I know that it takes a supportive administration and teachers. I know we've worked with very supportive administrators. So
yes, I think that is true. In the middle school, especially in high school, I know for sure there's more electives and they allow that. I know mariachi was always the side of the culture. What do I say? The elective, that involved the culture, and now conjunto is becoming very popular as well. So as far as in elementary, it would have to be something after school until it builds up from there. And then yes, in the middle school and the high school, for sure, they should be okay with having it, as an elective. But you do need to, I guess, like I said, show how much involvement and how much these kids are actually interested in. So once I would say, start a little small group after school, and then build from there, so that the school district can say, hey, we like that, and we can support you.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering that question from Shirley. And Shirley Johnson, thank you for your question. Maybe I can follow up on this education thread here, because a lot of you mentioned that, and the importance of teaching students, young kids. Does anybody else have anything else to add on the education part of this, in terms of the project of keeping these music traditions sustainable and sort of building from the education perspective?
I'd like to just add that I know that some of the musicians, for example, Terrence Simeon, he's got a music in the schools program. I forgot what it's called, but he does target some of the schools and the younger kids, and just kind of showing them what roots music is all about. specifically zydeco music. He brings out the instruments and goes from there, makes it festive, and gets the entire school or all the kids involved, getting them to actually play an instrument and all of that, but gets them interested in trying to understand a little bit of the music and as far as the culture. He does a little bit of a presentation as well as far as where is zydeco music coming from, and again, goes touring to several. I think he does this definitely on a volunteer basis. When he's touring, he does make sure that he includes some of the schools in his schedule. So I have to commend him for that. That is something that is awesome that I've seen.
Charlie, if I could say something about it, I mean, a few different things across all these different kind of cultures. I mean, I think what Santiago's doing and what the conjunto programs do, that's especially important, is they're bringing a music that had a reputation as a cantina music, a kind of low class music, and of course, like, that's why everybody loves it. But so you bring it into the schools, and then maybe there's some resistance in some quarters. And mariachi, which is a kind of pan-Latino, or national Mexican music, as opposed to just like a real regional music like conjunto music. So it has a really validating function that I think then tells kids, hey, it's okay, to like this music. You don't have to, pretend you only want to listen to jazz or whatever. And then kind of a similar thing operates in, from what I understand, in the Czech music world in Texas, because a lot of people study band in school, and so they play a lot of the brass bands, which a lot of the Czech bands have, but the accordion has kind of dropped off. And then the fiddle in Czech music partly dropped off, and partly that's for a variety of different reasons according to what people like to listen to, but part of it is because if it's not taught, then it kind of disappears, and so the brass band tradition kind of continues. So I mean, I think it's, that's valuable. And then you have a music like jazz, which was like a cantina music, for the people used to party to, and now it's become just a music of conservatories and universities and high school band programs. And so the difference is, I think it came out of the culture and became an art music. And conjunto music, there's that big back and forth. And I'll just say one more anecdote. La Jolla, they have a huge program, and I went and visited there a few years ago, actually with Christina when she was with Texas Folklife, and one of the best stories I got out of there is they don't even teach accordion, because all the kids show up and they can all play accordion, all of them. So they teach bajo, and they teach like conjunto band management, they teach like arrangements, but it's like the culture is just booming out there. And so then the purpose of the school is, well, let's professionalize this, let's teach you what to do with it, let's make it into something that's really useful. So it's that bouncing back and forth is important.
Absolutely. Santiago, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I like to also include that I know that there are programs during the summer, specifically like the library has a program where they're showcasing music. And that has been pretty awesome to see as well. They've been, in the past year, they've been featuring zydeco music. I know in San Mateo County and in California, Andre Theory has been performing at the local libraries. And it's kind of just, again, informing the general public that he's going to be there. He comes in and doing kind of like, how they do the reading circle, but he's showcasing his instruments and, just bringing in the basics, the accordion, the drums, and the frottoir, the scrub board. And he'll just go doing a little bit of a history and does a little bit of a performance and gets the students involved as well. And there's parents that have never actually, have heard the music or know a little bit of the history. So now they're also getting this information right there at the library. So that's that's another program that's been happening in recent years, and I've seen it, and it's pretty awesome.
I want to just add one more thing to this discussion. The other part of educating young people, besides actually teaching them how to play the instruments, is the language. And Frances mentioned that in her presentation. of how a lot of people don't understand the words of the songs in Czech. And when we at Texas Folklife started in the early years of the Big Squeeze, researching all the different traditions of Czech specifically was one where they told us over and over that Czech and German used to be taught in the schools, I guess maybe 100 years ago or maybe 50 years ago, and it's not anymore. And so that's not supported, and it's kind of put on the elders of the community or families. And same with Creole. I know some musicians have tried to gather people and promote that and teach lessons. Sean Nardwan in Louisiana had a circle of people for a while doing that to teach Creole and promote that. But that's just another side of the sustainability, I think.
Yeah, one other thing that we've been including is having on the zydeco workout on the radio program is we also make sure that we incorporate, at least during the first hour, we incorporate Creole music, specifically music that has the Creole French sounds, the language in there, because we want to make sure that people are aware that this is where it comes from. Yes, zydeco music has evolved and is constantly changing, but this is where it comes from, you know, having that language included in there. And we also make sure to include a waltz, because waltz music is something that is so important to zydeco music, and we want to make sure that our young people who are learning to play zydeco music can understand the waltz, how to play a waltz, and the meaning. Why is it so important to zydeco music? So we definitely push for that as well.
Great. If I can throw a question at you, Francis, picking up on some of the things that were said, your research is amazing, and it's amazing to see the historical photographs and kind of that story of the history of the migration and how that the Texas Czech community sort of developed here. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the living cultural traditions and the living kind of Texas Czech communities here in our state, because all of us here on this panel have probably been to some pretty large, some pretty happening polka events. This is not just historic music, this is living music now. And so I'm just wondering if you can talk about that from your perspective as a scholar or performer and the music that you play.
Yeah, well, there's several aspects to what is, I think, reinvigorating polka quite a bit. And one of those is the Texas Polka News, which you're probably familiar with. It's a newspaper that's published out of several places. Actually, Fayetteville being one, and Houston is where the publisher lives. And it comes out monthly, and it just has a real enthusiastic group of writers who work for it. There's a young guy who does a lot of reviewing of CDs and recordings, and there's the editor who has a very folksy style, and he goes to everything and reports on everything, and it's really become very important to a lot of people. It publishes, of course, all the different events that are happening, and especially during the summer when all the church picnics and when the festivals and all of the big events happen. There's just continual, every weekend you can do quite a few. Picnics. There's probably 100 of those, during the summer, and it's a very it's a very community-oriented music, and people support it, and it also is wrapped up pretty tightly with the Catholic Church and with supporting a lot of the parishes, or bringing in a lot of extra money, and so that whole newspaper that helps to get the word out like that is pretty unusual, especially in Czech polka, because it's been here so long that it's kind of hard to keep alive, but it's also importantly changing, and there are I mean, the Czech language has always been very, very important to it, but there are a number of musicians now who are writing songs in English. We're really kind of the first time in Texas. It used to be very frowned on. I mean, it was, you know, people were very conservative about how they dealt with the music. But there's some bilingual songs. I mean, there are a number of songs coming out and they're becoming performed. There are a lot of young bands that are just very enthusiastic about the music. I mean, there's a group that formed in Ennis, trying to remember what year it was, you know, not too many years ago, that just on a dare, they decided to put together a polka band for a talent show. And they stay together ever since, and they still play. It's called the Moravians. And they're a great young band, and they play in Czech, but they also have some English words. And, you know, so all of that's all very important, but it's also important the kind of, like you know, you can hear just depending on where the bands are. There's some of the bands like in Lavaca County, they're further south, that begin to have this conjunto sound that the accordion players, you know, I mean, Czech polka in Texas has always had a big mix of, because there's such a great mix of music in Texas. And so it's always sounded differently than the bands up north and in the Midwest, because it brings in all these elements. I mean, Adolf Hofner, of course, did Western swing and Czech polka. And all of his polkas sounded like Western swing, but they were all in the Czech language. And it was very popular when he was so big. And I mean, this continues, this kind of tradition of you know, of borrowing from all the different cultures and respecting all that kind of, you know, the different musics. So it's, you know, it feels pretty vibrant right now. I think that one thing that we don't have is a lot of material, the songbooks. We don't have children's books, and with, you know, children's Czech music. And I think some of that is starting to happen now. So, you know, it's we'll see where it goes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, shout out to Gary McKee and Teresa Parker of
Oh,
Texas
yes.
Polka News and Polka Beat for the work that they do. Kind of maybe a combination of the things Dan mentioned. You know, there's the kind of the business aspect of these traditions and the DIY kind of grassroots elements of it. So the work that they are doing is amazing. If you want to know what's going on with Texas Polka, you can pick up that newspaper. I have a question for the group here. We haven't really gotten into this at all. You know, also, you know, Dan mentioned this idea that some of these traditions are handmade. These are handmade cultures, and so being there, being in a place is really important for experiencing them. And at this time, with this global pandemic we're facing, how do we do that? How do we support artists? How do we continue the education? How do we touch on all these aspects of these ecosystem components that you all have mentioned right now and in the future as we sort of move through this? What are ideas you're seeing or that you're implementing for how to do that? How to work with these handmade cultures in a time where we're all supposed to be distant from each other?
I wanted to mention just the quickest way that people could support the music and the culture of Texas is to support the professional musicians who are completely without an industry right now. We all are learning this technology as fast as we can and sharing our talents and our interests with each other. So a lot of performers are doing live stream, live performance via Facebook Live or Instagram Live or YouTube, and listing their Venmo or Cash App handles so that you can tip them. It's not equaling what they were making, but it's one way to help. And I think Charlie and I can agree that the programs that he's been doing and that we are doing with the Big Squeeze we've seen a lot of support. And I wasn't sure as a full-time event producer what to expect when this happened, and we had to think about how to produce events online only, whether people would engage. But the plus side is that most of us are all at home, so we're on social media a lot, and I think it's been very comforting and healing to people to get to see their favorite artists, even if they're a scaled down band in a household or in a garage performing. So that's my tip.
One of the ways that we are working with the musicians is kind of helping them through this process of unemployment benefits and kind of navigating through the site and helping them out with that. I know that my partner, Rod, that's one of the big focuses that he's been working on right now with individuals, just walking them through the process. And I know some of our musicians, they're so focused on their music alone that they may not be aware of how to use a computer. You know, basic stuff that we are, you know, we're working on Zoom right now. That may not be something that they're familiar with. So again, that's something that we're supporting them with. I know that unemployment benefits have been extended now to gig workers, musicians, vendors, stagehands, things like that, you know, those titles. So those unemployment benefits are available for our people, our musicians. And some of our musicians may not even be aware of that. So we're here, we're supporting them through that, helping them, you know, navigate the websites and things like that. We're also supporting our musicians by helping them with social media, helping them, you know, with, again, setting up their Facebook profiles and Twitters and Instagrams and all of that, and kind of helping them manage the content. Production writers, now is the time to look at production writers, the stage plots, the you know, just the contracts. Look at all of that, revise it. How can we help you through it? What are the questions that you are experiencing? What you know, how else? We just start from the beginning, you know? And so that's what we're doing right now while the musicians are, you know, in downtime, and some other musicians, like you mentioned, Sarah, that are doing the Facebook Live and are performing. We do our part by sharing it with our groups as well, to give them a bigger audience, so that hopefully they do get a little bit of an income coming in from that Cash App, the donations, all of that. So we do our part there.
I agree with everything everyone's been saying, and I heard a line once where, and I don't remember who said it, but it was people, you know, they go to festivals to get inspired, but then they go home and look at YouTube to learn. And you know, that was before the pandemic. But you know, I think actually, if you're of a certain age, you know, the complete integration of your life into social media and technology is not really that much of a leap. So the real thing is to make a some kind of structure for musicians who usually live more marginally than some, or don't have a steady paycheck, or all of these things, you know, to figure out a ways to, you know, assuming that things will only be slowly be returning to some semblance of normalcy. So I think arts organizations like Texas Folklife, that's a really important, you know, structural aspect that previously has, you know, we've all thought about grants and, you know, certain gigs for X amount of time or whatever, but to actually think about it in terms of long-term sustainable economic cultures, the way that Lola's talking about, it's something that, you know, if you like, I plan a festival, you think on an annual basis, or you think next grant cycle or whatever, but to really think, you know, how do you structure things so if there is some kind of weird event, you know, you don't become homeless, or, and you know, have to sell your instrument, I mean, how many great musicians, accordion players had upon their accordions? There's a number I can think of. So, you know, it's just to avoid that, you know, I think would be a huge help for arts organizations.
Yeah, I think that's right. Santiago, are you teaching remotely right now, or how is that working with your students?
Yeah, well, I've been doing Zoom. I've been using Zoom. We did try playing together in Zoom, but that doesn't work. So what I do is I go through Google Classroom, and I assign them, you know, I assign them practice lessons. So I'll go ahead and videotape myself, kind of like YouTube type of thing, but me personally doing it. And it seems to be getting more of a connection that way, I guess, because they know me and I talk to them. And then I'll send them the link. They practice, then we schedule a meeting again, and they ask me any questions about what they need to work on, or they'll play for me individually. So that's the way we've been doing it, because as you know, like I mentioned, Zoom, the latency of the sound, it won't work. And the only other thing would be to be pre-recorded, where everybody records their own part, puts mesh the sound together and make a song. So that's the only way we've been doing it as of now.
Well, that's great. You've been able to at least continue some of that teaching. I think there's a lot of these tools that have limitations, and so I think it is true that organizations like ours and all of you, the work you're doing, we need to look at, you know, are we using the best platforms for what we want to do? Do we want to try to learn some new languages, some new skills, so that we can in turn give some of those ideas to those who could really use digital platforms to get their music out there, get their message out there. So I think it's, in a way,
Exactly,
exciting, an exciting time, but also we're trying to figure it out ourselves.
We're trying to learn. Yes, I'm trying to learn different other ways to, you know, to interact with the students, teach them through the digital world now.
Right on. Well, I've had you here for over an hour and a half. I really appreciate everyone's comments. We could talk all night about a lot of topics we explored. I'm wondering if anybody on the panel wants to say anything else about their projects, the issue of sustainability in Texas accordion music. Does anybody have any?
I had one final thing that I forgot to say earlier, and a couple just quick notes off of what everyone has been contributing tonight. We were mostly talking about conjunto and Czech polka and zydeco, but there are many genres of accordion-based music worldwide, and almost all of them are living in Texas. So that's one note of what to look out for if you don't know about this music, things that you can seek out, like Dan said, after you go to a festival or after you hear us talk about it. And the other thing is that we talked about what we were doing to sustain it, but a lot of times it can feel like some of this music is not necessarily thriving. There's a lot of other ways that we could have support that we just are not able to get all at once. But I think it's important for all of us to stay positive and to do our part and realize that this music is not extinct. It may be endangered at times, but it's kind of a cyclical thing. Like you see in the history of blues music, it has already had like 3 resurgence in popularity. So we see it thriving within communities in Texas, and we know that we can promote it in other parts of the country.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for adding those words, Sarah. I want to thank our panelists for joining us this evening. Francis Barton, Dan Margulies, Sarah Rucker, Lola Love, Santiago Castillo. Thank you all for being here and talking a little bit about this with us tonight. I also wanted to remind everyone, another sort of plug for this Friday, May 1st at 3 p.m. Central Time. Texas Folk Life is hosting the finals of our statewide Big Squeeze Youth Accordion Contest. We're going to have a lot of treats for you, including an announcement of the 2020 winners. We're going to have some performances by past Big Squeeze champions. It's going to be a lot of fun, so I encourage you to tune in 3 p.m. Central Time on Friday. I also wanted to thank you so much to some of the members of our team here behind the scenes, producing this video virtual panel. Gabriella Kane, who's a Texas Folklife team member, as well as Danae Johnson, who's fielding some of the social media questions. So it takes a group to put this together, so I wanted to make sure they were recognized. And this is going to go archived on our Facebook page. Panelists, anything you want to add, resources that we should check out or we should promote as part of this program, please send those to me. Please post them on Facebook. We want to make sure that audiences can learn more from the work you do. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. And I hope everyone stays safe and stays healthy. And we will catch you soon. For Texas Folklife, this is Charlie Lockwood signing off. Thank you so much.